Hello everyone, this video is part of the Git for the SalesLogix Developer Series. We're going to look at how to get initially installed on a new workstation and get it configured. So first of all, the main tool we're going to use in this series is called Git Extensions. Git Extensions is a Windows UI for Git. It doesn't contain any of the Git commands itself. It's just kind of a front end to make it a little bit easier to work with. It does, however, as part of the Git Extensions install, allow you to install the core Git system for Windows, which is called msysgit. So I've gone to the Git Extensions page, and over here on the right side you'll see featured downloads, or you could go to the Downloads tab to select a particular install. So the one we're going to use is this one called Complete. Complete gives you the option of installing msysgit, which is the core Git system for Windows, as well as kdiff3, which is a merge and comparing tool that we'll use quite often. So we're going to grab that. I already have it downloaded, and I'm going to run that install. Now there's a couple of different options we want to just make sure you select as you install Git Extensions. I'm going to click Next to get into here. First is, we do want to choose this option of installing msysgit. That is the core Git system for Windows, and without that the Git Extensions UI won't be able to have any functionality at all. So we're going to click the Install msysgit. It's going to launch the installer for that, and I'll just click through a few of these screens here. Now when we get to the option of adjusting your path environment, I personally like to choose the second option of run git from the Windows command prompt. That basically just modifies your system path environment variable so that you can issue git commands from a standard command prompt, and even better, use them in batch files. So I'm going to choose that. As far as the line endings, I'll leave it on just the Windows style line endings, and we will change that once we get into configuring Git itself. And here we do need to have a merge and comparing tool installed on the system. Beyond Compare is great, diff merge is great. If you don't have one that you're using, you might as well give kdiff3 a try. It's one that's relatively easy to understand. So I'm going to go ahead and install kdiff3 as well. Now that we've installed both of those, I'll continue on with the Git Extensions install. Now when it gets to the option of selecting an SSH client, the SSH client that I prefer is PuTTY, or also known as P-Link. I like that. I like the way that it integrates with Windows. I'll show you how that works as we get into configuring it, but that's the option that we'll choose for this series. And now just the standard Git Extensions will install, and we'll pick up from there. We now have Git Extensions installed. All the tools we're going to use are installed. So I'm going to click Finish. Now, in order for me to use Git with something like Github, which is what we are going to assume you're using for this series, we need to create a public and private key pair. The public-private key pair allows us to be authenticated as a particular person when we're pushing things to GitHub. We'll give GitHub our public part of that, and then we push along with our private key. So we do need to create that key pair. So to do that, I'm going to go to the Git program group that'll now exist from the installs we just ran, and I'm going to run the Git GUI. Now in the Help menu, there's an option for Show SSH Key. I'm going to go there. I don't yet have one, so I'm going to click Generate Key. And I need to choose a passphrase for this key. This passphrase is what allows me to use it in the future, so I'll need to remember what this is. So I'm just going to put a passphrase of password. Okay, So now I have the key created. You'll see it lists here that here's where the private key, the public part of that key is, which is also showing me that contents here. Now I'm going to use this here when I create my GitHub account. This is what I'm going to give to GitHub so that it knows what the public part of my key is. So I'm going to go to GitHub and I'm going to create a new account. Now I have another post that I outline how Customer Effects uses GitHub. For individual developer accounts we use the free account, and then the corporate account is what's the paid plan. So I'm going to create a free account. And for this free account I'm just going to call it, username is Ryan Test. Oh, already been taken, so I'll call it Ryan Farley Test. And then the email address. Okay, I've given it my basic information to create the account. I'm going to create the account, and now once I have my account created, I'm going to go into the account settings. Oops. The account settings here, where I will be able to go to the SSH public keys, and I'm going to click this add another public key, and I'll just call this just call it Ryan Test Key, and then I'll paste in the contents from that dialog when I created my public private key pair. So I'm going to click add key. So there's my key. It's been added to my GitHub account. So now when I push things to GitHub, it will recognize along with that push goes my private key, and it'll match it up to my public key pair that I have there. So I can now close this. Now you'll see that I have a Git Extensions icon installed on my desktop here. I'm going to start up Git Extensions. And I need to configure a few things. So I'm going to go to the Global Settings tab, and I'll give it a username. Now this doesn't necessarily have to match up with the username on GitHub, but it's nice to have it be the same. And now I'm going to go to the SSH tab, ensure that PuTTY is selected there, and I'm going to click OK. So now my settings have been completed there. And so now a couple of things I need to do. I'm going to go to Remotes, PuTTY, and then Generate or Import Key. Now what I'm doing here is I'm creating a key pair for PuTTY that will use my public-private key pair that we created earlier. So I'm going to do Generate or Import Key. So I'm going to here go to Conversions and Import Key, and I'm going to browse to select the key pair that I already created. If you paid attention before, it mentioned that it created that key pair under this .ssh folder. And I'm going to select the private part of that, the ID RSA. It's going to ask me for the passphrase, which I set to password. And now I'm going to click the Save Public Key, and I'll call this PuTTY Public. Oops. And then I'll save the private part of that, and I'll call this PuTTY Private. You'll notice that it's creating a PuTTY private key file, a PPK. So now if I look in that folder, I'll see that I have the original public-private key pair along with this sort of wrapper for that I'll use through PuTTY. Now when I'm using PuTTY, there's this authentication agent, this little app that runs in the tray and kind of pushes that private key along with the requests I make. You'll see that it's running here now. I've gone to remote and then PuTTY, start authentication agent, and that's what started this running. So now I'm going to open it up and I'm going to add my key to this authentication agent. So I'm going to browse to the location where I have my PuTTY private, put in the password for that, and now that's loaded. So now that's the key that's going to get sent along with my request to GitHub. Now when I use Git on other workstations, I don't need to go through those steps of creating an additional key pair. I can, as long as I associate that key pair with my GitHub account, but I don't need to. I can just make a copy of these keys that I've created here and just put them on the new workstation and save all those steps of creating the new key pairs. And that's what I typically do. I usually keep my keys in my Dropbox account so I can easily have it go to whatever machine I'm using. So at this point, Git and Git Extensions is all configured and set up for use. Now, since this series is meant for SalesLogix developers, there's one other tool that we're going to install. We will be referring to it and using it throughout this series. It does make your job a little bit easier as far as SalesLogix development goes, so we are going to install it. It is called Git Extensions for SalesLogix. Now, what Git Extensions for SalesLogix is it integrates Git Extensions into the SalesLogix application architect, just giving you a lot of the core functionality that you'll use day to day right there within inside of application architect. Now, to get it installed, if you go to github.com/customereffects, you'll go to the Customer Effects development home on GitHub, where we host some of our open source items, and SalesLogix Git Extensions is listed there. If you click on that, it'll take you to the Git Extensions page, and there's a wiki that's part of that repository. Here you could download the source for SalesLogix Git Extensions if you'd like, but the wiki has a page for installation. But basically, there is a URL here that you'll click that will start a Click Once installer. If I click that now, it takes me to the page for the Click Once installer, and I'll simply click Install, and it'll start the Click Once installer. This will install Git Extensions for SalesLogix only on my workstation. It doesn't install Git Extensions or any of the Git system itself on Windows. That's assumed that you already have that installed and set up. But I'll click Install, and it'll run the installer for that and then launch a wizard that'll allow me to get it integrated into the application architect. So here's the wizard. What this wizard does is it will check for updates to Git Extensions for SalesLogix every time you close application architect. So if you need to configure a proxy for that, you can go ahead and bring up that dialog to do so. Or you can also disable the auto update feature if you'd like. But all I'm going to do here is click Start Installation. It's going to download the latest assembly or DLL for Git Extensions for SalesLogix from GitHub, and then it's installed it and integrated it into Application Architect. So I'm going to close this wizard now. Now if I bring up Application Architect, it's going to show us some additional items on the toolbar and menus that integrate some of the Git functionality into Application Architect. So I can see here on the toolbar some of the Git buttons, as well as the Git Extensions menu in Application Architect as well. We'll cover how to use that in a later video, but for now we have Git completely installed and set up and ready for use. So get your own system set up according to what we've outlined on this video here, and in our next post we can go through how to use it and start going through some of the day-to-day features.